It was supposed to be a routine flight, the kind that happens every day, without incident or fanfare. Passengers boarded with little thought, expecting nothing more than a few hours in the air and a safe arrival at their destination. The journey was a short hop over the Andes, a route that had been flown countless times before, connecting two cities separated by a wall of mountains and sky. On October 13, 1972, a Fairchild FH-227D took off from Montevideo, Uruguay, carrying 45 souls, mostly young rugby players, their friends and family members. For many, it was a chance to travel, to compete, and to share an adventure together. Spirits soared as high as the plane itself, laughter echoed through the cabin, and the team, full of youthful energy and hope, looked forward to their match in Santiago. The atmosphere was one of excitement, camaraderie, and anticipation. But the Andes are ancient and indifferent to human plans. Their peaks, shrouded in mystery and danger, have witnessed countless stories, some triumphant, many tragic. As the plane approached the mountains, thick clouds gathered, and the weather turned treacherous. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, forcing the pilots to rely on their instruments and instincts, flying blind through a maze of rock and ice. Believing they had safely cleared the highest peaks, the crew began their descent, unaware that they were still surrounded by towering ridges hidden in the mist. Suddenly, disaster struck. The plane slammed into a ridge with a deafening roar. Metal screamed, wings tore away, and the fuselage was sent careening down a glacier, tumbling and breaking apart as it went. Inside, chaos erupted. Passengers were thrown from their seats, screams filled the air, prayers were whispered, and fear gripped every heart. In those moments, time seemed to stretch and shatter. When the wreckage finally came to a halt, a heavy silence settled over the frozen valley. The only sounds were the howling wind and the distant echoes of what had just occurred. In a matter of minutes, a joyful journey had been transformed into a living nightmare. The faces that had been smiling moments before were now etched with shock and disbelief. The survivors, battered, bruised, and disoriented, found themselves stranded in a white wasteland, thousands of meters above sea level, with no shelter, no warmth, and no idea if help would ever come. No one knew where they were. The world below was oblivious to their fate, and the vast, unforgiving mountains seemed to swallow them whole. Now, their real battle began, the fight for survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Every moment would test their courage, their willpower, and their hope. The Andes had claimed them, and as the cold set in, escape seemed not just unlikely, but impossible. Yet, in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit would be pushed to its absolute limit. The passengers were more than teammates, they were brothers, bound by years of friendship and rugby. Their journey began with excitement, but the crash shattered everything in an instant. 12 died on impact, others would succumb to injuries and cold. The survivors, dazed and grieving, faced a brutal new reality. The warmth of camaraderie was replaced by biting cold and thin air. The Andes demanded everything: strength, hope, and unity. Their bond, once forged on the field, became their only lifeline. The world they knew was gone, replaced by a desperate struggle for survival. Every decision now meant life or death. The adventure had become a nightmare with no end in sight. Only together could they hope to endure. The crash site was a graveyard of twisted metal and snow, a place where the world seemed to end, and time stood still. The silence was broken only by the howling wind and the distant rumble of avalanches, echoing through the desolate expanse. Surrounded by towering, impassable peaks, the survivors found themselves trapped in a vast, frozen labyrinth. The Andes loomed above them, their jagged ridges forming an unbreakable wall of ice and stone. At over 11,000 feet, the survivors awoke to a frozen hell. The thin air burned their lungs and every breath was a struggle. The sun offered little warmth, and the nights brought a cold so deep it seemed to seep into their bones. Shock gave way to action. Those able helped the wounded, improvising splints and blankets from the wreckage. Every scrap of metal, every torn piece of fabric became a tool for survival as they worked together to tend to the injured. Medical students Roberto Canessa and Gustavo Zerbino tended to the injured, saving lives with ingenuity and grit. Their training was limited, but their determination was boundless, and their hands became the only hope for the gravely hurt. The cold was relentless. Their clothing was no match for the freezing nights. Thin shirts and light jackets offered little protection, and frostbite became a constant threat as temperatures plunged below zero. Huddled in the fuselage, they blocked the wind with luggage and seats, clinging to each other for warmth. The battered shell of the plane became their only refuge, a fragile barrier against the merciless elements outside. A small radio became their only link to hope. Each day they gathered around it, straining to catch news from the outside world, desperate for any sign that rescue might be on its way. Days passed, but no rescue came. The white fuselage was invisible against the snow, hidden from the eyes of searchers flying overhead. The vastness of the mountains swallowed their cries for help. On the 8th day, the radio delivered a crushing blow. The search was called off. The announcement echoed in the cold air, shattering the last remnants of certainty and plunging the group into despair. The world had given up on them. In that moment, the survivors realized they were truly on their own, abandoned in a wilderness that seemed endless and indifferent. Hope faded, replaced by a chilling silence. The weight of isolation pressed down on them, and the reality of their predicament became painfully clear. They were truly alone, prisoners of the Andes. The mountains, once beautiful, now felt like the walls of a merciless white prison, holding them captive with no escape in sight. Survival would demand more than they ever imagined. In the face of overwhelming odds, they would have to summon a strength and resilience few could ever comprehend. With rescue abandoned, survival became a daily war. Food was scarce, just a few chocolate bars, crackers, and wine rationed to crumbs. Hunger gnawed at their bodies, the cold at their spirits. Melting snow for water, huddling for warmth, they endured endless nights of shivering and fear. Then, disaster struck again. An avalanche buried the fuselage, suffocating 8 more. Trapped for days, the survivors clawed their way out, traumatized and fewer in number. The mountain had stripped away any illusion of safety. Despair threatened to consume them, but resolve hardened. They realized passivity meant death. The avalanche was a brutal turning point. They had to act or perish. The will to survive demanded impossible choices. The Andes would not let them hide. Only action could save them now. Starvation loomed, their bodies wasted away, every option was exhausted. The only food left was unthinkable, the bodies of their friends preserved in the snow. The idea was horrifying, clashing with their deepest beliefs. Debate raged, survival versus morality. Roberto Canessa argued, their friends would want them to live. Slowly a pact formed, if any died, the others could use their bodies to survive. The first act was agony, a line crossed with prayer and tears. They ate, not out of desire, but necessity. This desperate choice bound them together in a new terrible way. It was a secret they would carry forever. Survival had a price, and they paid. Weeks passed. Sustenance kept them alive, but hope was fading. They knew they couldn't wait for rescue. Escape was their only chance. Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa prepared for a final trek, fashioning makeshift gear from plane scraps. Weak but determined, they set out toward Chile, climbing a 15,000-foot peak. At the summit, despair only endless mountains ahead. Giving up was tempting, but Nando refused. "I'd rather walk to my death than wait for it," he said. With renewed resolve, they pressed on, enduring a grueling 7-day journey. Every step was agony, but they would not turn back. Their courage became the last hope for all. The mountain tested their limits, but they would not surrender. The fate of the group rested on their shoulders. The final gamble had begun. After 10 days of relentless struggle, Nando and Roberto, battered by hunger and exhaustion, stumbled through the frozen wilderness. Their bodies were frail, their minds clouded by fatigue, but hope flickered as they pressed on. Suddenly, through the blur of snow and pain, they glimpsed a river, a sign of life and civilization. On the opposite bank, a solitary figure appeared, a man on a mule, Sergio Catalan, a humble Chilean herdsman. For Nando and Roberto, this was a vision almost too good to be true, the answer to desperate prayers. Too weak to cross the rushing water, they scrawled a desperate note on a scrap of paper. "I come from a plane that fell in the mountains. We need help. Please, don't leave us." Their hands trembled as they wrapped the message in a handkerchief and tossed it across the river. Catalan read the note, his eyes widening in shock. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he wasted no time. He mounted his mule and rode urgently to the nearest outpost, determined to bring help to the stranded men. News of the survivors' existence spread like wildfire, electrifying the world. Headlines blared the miracle in the Andes, and families clung to hope as the impossible became reality. Rescue helicopters, braving treacherous winds and blinding snow, raced to the crash site. The world watched breathlessly as the rescue unfolded high in the unforgiving mountains. Nando, summoning his last reserves of strength, guided the rescuers through the snowdrifts back to the fuselage where his friends waited, clinging to life. The remaining survivors, hearing the distant thrum of helicopter blades, stumbled from their icy shelter. Tears streamed down their faces as they realized rescue had finally come. The airlift was perilous, with rescuers battling altitude and weather, but on December 22 and 23, 1972, all 16 survivors were finally brought to safety. Against all odds, they had endured. The world erupted in celebration. Strangers embraced in the streets, and the survivors' courage and endurance became a beacon of hope for millions. But as the full story emerged, controversy followed. The revelation of their desperate pact to survive shocked many. Some recoiled in judgment, while others responded with deep empathy, understanding the unimaginable choices they faced. The Catholic Church, recognizing the extremity of their ordeal, defended the survivors, urging compassion and acknowledging the profound moral challenge they had endured. Their story became a symbol of both miraculous survival and the complex questions of morality that arise in the face of death. The survivors returned home to a world forever changed, carrying with them scars both visible and invisible. Their ordeal had transformed them and their families forever. The Andes had left its mark, not just on their bodies but on their souls and on the world that watched in awe. Survival was only the beginning. Physically they recovered, but the emotional scars ran deep. The world's curiosity became a burden. Their private ordeal was public spectacle. They explained their pact, seeking understanding, not judgment. Each survivor faced trauma in his own way. Some found faith, others struggled with guilt. Nightmares and memories haunted them. Their bond, forged in the mountains, became their greatest support. They spoke and wrote about their ordeal, honoring the lost and sharing lessons of teamwork and willpower. The Andes left a scar, a reminder of life's fragility and the strength within. Their story is not just about survival, but about living with the past and building a future. 50 years later, the story of Flight 571 still grips the world. It's a raw tale of life, death, hope, and the limits of human endurance. The survivors' teamwork and leadership were their salvation. Their ordeal forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about morality and survival. It demands empathy, not judgment. Above all, it's a story of hope, the human spirit enduring the impossible. The survivors built new lives, honoring those lost. Their journey is a lesson in courage, community, and resilience. The Andes tested them, but they triumphed. Their story asks us, what would you do when everything is stripped away?